I rise to make my contributions to this 2024 budget. Mr. Speaker, my colleague who spoke before me, and I'm calling him colleague because we have a mission to do. While he spoke about the 18,000 US, he forgot to mention the making of a scapegoat of an ordinary public servant with a 211 million US dollars. Which, Mr. Speaker, was written off, and even the minister claimed that he did not know who authorized the public servant to do that. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the opposition leader, the Honorable Captain Aubrey Norton, for allowing me this privilege to do what I have to do here. But Mr. Speaker, as we debate this budget, we must remember that quality education is the most powerful tool to realize opportunities. A tool children can use to end poverty and unemployment, despite their circumstances of birth, race, geography, or gender. The Ministry of Education, Mr. Speaker, has a mandate that is critical to the nation's development. And that is, if managed properly, it is a glorious opportunity for the nation. But when mismanaged, it is the disaster we find ourselves in today. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2024 was delivered under the theme, Staying the Course, Building Prosperity for All. A quick glance at this budget will reveal, Mr. Speaker, that there has been a daring misplacement of this theme in the history of presentations in this House. As a natural consequence, the budget needs to be rethemed and bear the title, Staying the Course for the Elite Friends, Families, Favorites, and Flatterers. Building prosperity for the PPP cronies. There is nothing here to transform the lives of teachers or change their sad working reality. This budget has once again confirmed to the teachers that their work is not valued by this government, and that the only hope lies in ensuring that they can get registered and prepare to return the coalition government to power. Mr. Speaker, the minister has lowered his office by delivering to us a shameful intellectual opportunism for 5 hours. The honorable member has confirmed that this government is in trouble by stretching statistics, numbers, and percentages to their thinnest to make this government look good. The honorable member dabbled in the dark arts of spinning numbers and narratives. This, Mr. Speaker, is the same skill of stretching the dollar in the case of the teachers and mothers in Guyana at the moment who have been forced to master the art of stretching food and money to their thinnest to survive in this elitist economy. If this budget, Mr. Speaker, was delivered as an assignment in any classroom, it would have been given an F grade, and the author's parents would have been called in. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member has lost credibility when he sought to mischaracterize the 2020 elections and failed to mention that the documented evidence indisputably shows that it was and it is still the People's Progressive Party who set this nation on a path to pain and national stress in December of 2018, when a parliamentary coup was launched against the coalition government. It is Guyana on a path of 2 years. It set Guyana on a path of 2 years of pain and distress, where school children were attacked. Mr. Speaker, policemen were chopped, and nurses returning from work had their cars destroyed, all at the hands of the PPP. Mr. Speaker, the hard documented evidence is not going anywhere. Mr. Speaker, valid ballots changed to rejected ballots. Rejected ballots changed to valid ballots. Electors voting with oath of identities not listed on the official list of documents, and I can go on and on and on. Mr. Speaker, as we continue to go on, this would have culminated in Guyana's first installed regime. And here we are, the fifth budget by a regime that does not reflect the will of the people. The budget reflects the thinking of a government who believes in the trickle-down economics, which means fattening the ruling class and hoping that they would pass the wealth to the bottom. Hence, Mr. Speaker, the education sector and teachers cannot expect much from this kind of government with that outdated thinking. Mr. Speaker, education is in trouble. And one can surmise this, Mr. Speaker, that education is not a puppy show. Education is a critical sector. But what have we seen? We have seen gloating in quality and not gloating in quantity. And that gloat has landed us in the crisis that we now find ourselves in. Mispronunciation of words at several forums, both locally and internationally. Mr. Speaker, not knowing where to put the word she, whether to say it's a preposition or a pronoun. The many fights among students, Mr. Speaker, education is in trouble. Mr. Speaker, the disrespect that has been meted out to teachers from learners, parents, and education officials. Mr. Speaker, to illustrate the grand failure of this budget for the education sector, it is necessary to compare what we did while we were in office and what this government has done this far. Mr. Speaker, under the coalition government, the incomparable Minister of Finance, Mr. Winston Jordan, on a path of unprecedented levels. During his tenure, the Honorable Winston Jordan, former minister, presented Budget 2020-15 to this House in August. It was entitled, A Fresh Approach to the Good Life in the Green Economy. In January of 2016, the minister presented again to this House a budget entitled, Stimulating Growth, Restoring Growth that Beckons the Good Life. Mr. Speaker, and I can go on and on to tell us about what the good life the people of Guyana live under the coalition. These budgets, Mr. Speaker, reflected the philosophical thinking and providing a good life for all Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, that remains the strength of the budgetary allocations for education that was made under the watch of the coalition. Importantly, sir, the 5 budgetary allocations for the education sector by the People's Progressive Party is the fact that money is being thrown to a ministry that continues to suffer the worst under the leadership that we have seen in education. Mr. Speaker, since time immemorial, the Ministry of Education has been preserved for learned technocrats who do not significantly and overtly dabble in politics and campaigning every day of the school year. The proud tradition has been maintained by all past ministers of government of education: Burnham, Baird, Shandy Singh, Bisnot, Gaskin, Henry, just to name a few. The reason that the Ministry of Education is normally staffed by a technocrat minister is to avoid a critical aspect of national development from being politicized. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, education is now well politicized. Today, the Ministry of Education is saddled with political leadership that is solely focused on the advancement of the party and not the welfare of our learners and our educators. Mr. Speaker, educational leadership is a collaborative process that brings together the skills and abilities of teachers, parents, the learners, their communities, and by extension, the government, thus ensuring that change is guaranteed by improved performance. This has to be the sole focus of a Minister of Education, not to sit and campaign every day every second of the day on a smartphone. Mr. Speaker, 68 Brigham has been so politicized, just like many other departments of education, where you have political lackeys with fat contracts who are clueless about education. They are now in charge of the ministry. Mr. Speaker, could you imagine our University of Guyana, 60 years old, has been given $4.1 billion, while a 3-year-old Guyana Girls Scholarship Program has been given $4.1 billion. It's a shame that we have our university here and we don't seek to promote and to build what we have.
Honorable member, I love the first one to go. This is the second time you're using it.
I'm guided, sir. While the experience, Mr. Speaker, the ministries the departments of education have been politicized, while the experience and technical education personnel have been sidelined. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the budget can allocate trillions and zillions to this sector. Once the situation remains the same, education will continue to fail and the crisis will continue. Mr. Speaker, when we look at what is happening in our schools, it leaves one to wonder. When we look at the videos that are circulating with fights, etc., it leaves one to wonder what is happening in education. But we seem to be saying, Mr. Speaker, that buildings seems to be the solution to the problem. Then if buildings were to be the solution of the problem, Mr. Speaker, then there would be no need for a Ministry of Education. There would be need for 2 ministries of public works. Mr. Speaker, therefore, this budget will not and has not done anything for our people in education. Sir, the reason that we have not seen the articulation of any clear education policy is because we hear the razzle and the dazzle on social media noises, but there is no mechanism to measure performance and programs. Mr. Speaker, a Minister of Education should not be versed in the art of cuss out and abuse out. A Minister of Education should oversee the drafting of policies and institute performance measures and conduct monitoring and evaluation systems. Sir, the effect of this wanton politicization is seen in the data. Even though Guyana boasts of a 90% literacy rate, educational literacy remains at an estimated 40%. Mr. Speaker, 55.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
you began this process by saying there should be decorum. And you have a member of parliament over there describing people as dangles.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, please. You have to stand on a point of order with due respect. And I didn't hear the honorable member, Ms. McDonald, violate the present business we run.
Can you keep it?
Children, don't follow that thing.
All right, you have protection, which you get back your time.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, just to remind the honorable member on the other side that with the Honorable MacDonald, I'm an adult, and we usually have consented arrangements, unlike the Julius arrangement. But Mr. Speaker, 55% of our students at the secondary level are failing English A. Mr. Speaker, 37 students are failing mathematics at the grade 4, are passing mathematics at the grade 4 level, 37%, while 63 of them are failing mathematics. This data is dismal. And despite the razzle and dazzle of a few high achievers and cutting the ribbons for brand new buildings, education still remains in crisis. This is the result of sheer politicization and incompetence. Mr. Speaker, the dangerous effects of this level of incompetence can be seen if one examines the Education Sector Reform Plan 2021-2025. The plan is premised on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 4, which states ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. This plan is entitled, they have there is entitled Eliminating Illiteracy, Enhancing Tolerance and Modernizing Education. The aim of the ESP is to contribute to employment and the reduction of poverty by increasing performance at all levels and reducing the disparity between subgroups. Mr. Speaker, based on the standards set out by this plan in the year 2024, the benchmarks have not been met, and it is safe to conclude that the billions thrown to this sector have missed the mark. Within the 3 years of the billions being thrown to achieve the sector, to allow the sector to achieve its aim, Mr. Speaker, so by the mechanism outlined, there is dismal failure at the level of the ministry. Mr. Speaker, based on this reality, we have no confidence that the $135 billion that has been allocated to this sector in this budget will move or change the dismal data that haunts the education in its current state. As usual, Mr. Speaker, the money will go to the friends, the family, the favorites, and the flatterers, and the entire crony class. We have not seen a single report with outcome measures that provides information on progress towards desired results in the key areas. The effectiveness of programs impacts on clients. There is no intermediate outcome measures that show some desired outcomes, and those results may not be known for several years. This only happens when a ministry is run by a person who is politically driven. Mr. Speaker, we must follow international best practices and standards and place a competent person with experience at the classroom or elsewhere at this ministry before it's too late. Unless this happens, Mr. Speaker, the budget allocations for this sector are an exercise at throwing monies at incompetence. Mr. Speaker, the aforementioned politicization of the ministry has led to false narratives being peddled at the level of the minister. Chief among the false narratives is the suggestion that the APNU AFC did not start or complete a single secondary school. Sir, let me say from the onset that one of the reasons the ministry is busy building secondary schools or constructing secondary schools is due to the fact that since the PPP were installed in August of 2020, there has been the mysterious burning of secondary schools. There is a school of thought that the cronies must be constantly fed, and as the pie is divided up amongst friends, families, cronies, and flatterers, there will be none left, and attention is now turned for an opportunity to create another hustle. Sir, this never occurred under the coalition government. So there was no need to constantly construct secondary schools. Mr. Speaker, what we did during our tenure in office is there for all and sundry to see. Let's not forget the Cato secondary fiasco. As early as 2016, works started on many primary schools and nursery schools across Region 2. These projects have been estimated within the millions. Mr. Speaker, undertaking the executions of these policies would have improved the educational facilities and the lives of students and the teachers in the Pomeroon Supernam region. Mr. Speaker, there were extensions at many schools, and these are all there for us to see. Further, Mr. Speaker, there was a $1.9 million that was invested in schools construction and repairs. This was the mess that the APNU AFC had to clean up when we took office in 2015. There was the rehabilitation of the living quarters in many areas. Teachers were able to live comfortable. Students were able to live comfortable in their dorms, and parents were happy that their children were safe. Under the coalition government, Mr. Speaker, without the benefit of oil money, there was the construction and the rehabilitation of schools, I must say, everywhere. There was no mysterious burnings under our watch. So there, again, was no need to build schools at that time. But under the watch of this minister, there have been the most fires in the history of Guyana and the region. Mr. Speaker, the minister seems to believe that the building of schools or the construction of schools is the solution to all of the crises that we are facing. It therefore means, Mr. Speaker, that the issues that we face in education, they must be addressed. When we look at the need for improved quality education, no attention is being paid there. Mr. Speaker, providing teachers with a livable wage, no attention is being paid there. Mr. Speaker, providing the resources and the environment that is conducive to teachers teaching and the children learning. And if we want to be factual, let's look at the St. Gabriel's Nursery School, where up to a day like today, the flooring is still sandy and dusty. And you know what they did? They took vinylin to cover that. Cheap labor, but big contracts. Mr. Speaker, we fail when we want to duck our heads in the sand and pretend that these aren't happening. Mr. Speaker, under the watch of the minister, there has been again, let's go to the Madia fire. Sir, chief among those fires, sir, among those was the saddest event in the country's modern history. The gross incompetence at the ministry, which we constantly refer to, would have cost this nation the loss of 20 beautiful indigenous children, the lives of 20 beautiful indigenous children in Region 8. This man-made disaster, Mr. Speaker, in normal society would have resulted in wanton resignations and firings, but not under the watch of the People's Progressive Party. Instead, what we have is the usual denials and attempts to escape responsibility by the Ministry of Education and the minister, while scapegoating of the regional education officer was done. Mr. Speaker, prior to that incident, prior to that fire, UNICEF and the Guyana Fire Service had submitted reports to the government of Guyana, warning about the safety of dormitories across Guyana, and also submitted recommendations to correct the risk. The ministry ignored these submissions. The government made matters worse when it sought to escape paying compensation to the families of those victims and established a commission of inquiry after insistent calls by the coalition. This uncaring behavior continued when the government appointed a COI without independent international commissioners. The COI, Mr. Speaker, has completed its work and the report has been presented. Mr. Speaker, we were not confident that this report will place the blame where it needs to be, squarely at the feet of the ministers. Sir, the doctrine of ministerial responsibility is clear. It is a fundamental constitutional principle in the Westminster parliamentary system, according to which ministers are responsible to the parliament for the conduct of their ministry and government as a whole. Ministerial responsibility, Mr. Speaker, is central to the parliamentary system because it ensures the accountability of the government to the legislature and thus ultimately to the public. We suspected, Mr. Speaker, that the report would have been crafted to suit the political aims of the regime. In the interest of the victims, their parents, the people of Region 8, and the general population, we will continue to call for an independent probe and a fair and proportional compensatory package for the victims and their families. Mr. Speaker, we reiterate the next coalition government will review this matter and make proper restitutions that fully respects the full scope of the loss of lives and grief experienced by those affected. Mr. Speaker, the budgetary allocations to the education sector reflects a vision of reflects the lack of a long-term vision. The allocations covered under this, the allocations covered are construction, distribution of textbooks, national school feeding program, the purchase of textbooks, the University of Guyana, the Gold Program, an arrangement with Cursor, ICT training for students, support for technical and vocational training. Some of the aforementioned are necessary, but Mr. Speaker, Guyana's largest budget has to be made with much stern and grand vision. On that consideration, I now direct my attention to the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect. Technically, the pandemic has not disappeared, and reports suggest that the virus is making a return. Sir, if one examines the National Consultation final report, you would appreciate concerns that this budget does not include a clear program that considers the fallout of the pandemic. Yeah. The report noted that Guyana risks losing between 0.9 and 1.1 learning adjusted years of school per student on an average, due to the elevated dropout rate and learning loss. If not addressed, it is estimated that there will be an average reduction in future earnings of $791 per student per year. The present value of all future lost earnings across Guyana is estimated to be at $1.2 billion. More sensible countries, Mr. Speaker, have announced huge catch-up programs. Chile has detailed a 4-year plan to catch up learning losses from COVID, not Guyana. Currently, there is no budgeted national catch-up plan. This concerning data behoves any planners of the country's fiscal direction to include plans to address the effects of the pandemic and place the nation on a path to cushion the next disaster. Insofar as this budget, it doesn't cater for that, and it has dismally failed. Sir, according to companies overseas, Guyana's had an internet penetration rate of 37.33% in 2017. What that means was that less than 40% of Guyana's population then had access to and were using the internet. Data Reportal, an online platform which summarizes third-party data to illustrate trends and provide insights, indicated that of January 2020, 55% of the population of approximately 430,000 persons were using the internet. Comparatively, the Caribbean region has a 60% rate internet penetration, while South America has a 72% rate. One of the main issues encountered during the pandemic was the problem of the access to the internet. Where is the allocation, Mr. Speaker, in the largest budget to address this problem in the event that we are forced to take education fully online again? Sir.
Honorable member, we will need to give you an extension to conclude.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. I do move that the honorable member be given 5 minutes to conclude her presentation.
Thank you, honorable member. 5 minutes to conclude.
Sir, long-term and strategic planning requires a greater vision. UNESCO submitted that there is no doubt that ICT can impact learning in a significant way, but that must also be cautioned in a significant way, but also caution that teachers must be computer literate. This budget should have included a program for teachers to address the use of technology for teaching purposes in every sphere of this country. In the context of the oil and gas revenue, ICT can play a significant role in the delivery of education. But Mr. Speaker, the teachers must be crucially a part and equally involved in this process. Mr. Speaker, the literature notes that ICT can result in positive transformation for the delivery of education, but it has to be buttressed by teachers who are computer literate, not some, but all teachers. But the sad reality is that once you have a minister who is focused solely on scoring political points, these things will not be considered. Mr. Speaker, the University of Guyana is under attack. If there was any question about this budget and the Vice President has removed all doubts from our minds. There is no other assessment to make. Mr. Speaker, again, imagine our university, and I must repeat, imagine our university, 60 years old, is allotted $4.1 billion, while a 3-year-old is allotted $4 billion. What a travesty and unpatriotic move by the caring government, the PPP. Mr. Speaker, the PPP doesn't want the University of Guyana to grow because they are fearful that it poses a threat to their controlled freakism. Over the years, the university has emerged as an important institution that indirectly checks the government and its excesses. The physical attendances lead to the congregation, Mr. Speaker, of students in societies. They discuss the word, and invariably, students leave the university conscious and more educated. Added to this, Mr. Speaker, they sit in classroom with lecturers who teach them how to think critically. This is the fear of the People's Progressive Party. that they cannot control the university, and what they cannot control, they do not fund. This is the same fiscal treatment that the Georgetown municipality receives. It is the same treatment, Mr. Speaker, that the Critchlow Labor College receives. It is the same treatment, Mr. Speaker, that IPADG receives. And then we want to talk about a caring government. Well, somebody is hiding somewhere because they don't understand the meaning of caring. Mr. Speaker, the PPP has always viewed the university as an institution of resistance, and for that, they must be punished. And this budget, Mr. Speaker, this laid bare in the presentation of Budget 2024 with the $4 billion allocation to the newfound Guyana Online Academy of Learning. While we welcome any chance for Guyanese to be qualified and to add to their resume, we must remain concerned over this approach. The government, Mr. Speaker, has pushed to online education. The government's push to online education should be coupled with the development of the university. The two objectives can be combined. On one hand, we can develop UG and at the same time move to online learning. It is unacceptable that the university's funding is now equaled to an academy of learning that is under direct political direction. This would have been the perfect opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to fund the University of Guyana and make it into a world-class institution. As there is no monitoring and evaluation of the Gold Scholarship Program, our research has uncovered major issues with the Gold Program. Nobody knows where the ranking.
So you'll have to wrap up in half a minute.
Mr. Speaker, why would the government throw $4 billion to a program without a report that answers the concerns of our students? Mr. Speaker, Budget 2024 is funneled and fixed between the Treasury and the pockets of friends, families, cronies, and flatterers of the People's Progressive Party to allow the oil money to flow into a small circle without a single drop of the oil money escaping to reach the people at the bottom of the society. In its current state, Mr. Speaker, I cannot support this budget.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member.